Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Today is the 6th anniversary of opening up this place. 6 years ago on June the 1st, a few vehicles rolled up here from the Bay Area, and Abhayagiri Monastery began. So stopped just being an idea, and finally got launched. And so we say, 6 years ago, this place came into being. And so it's quite normal for us, isn't it, just to have birthdays and anniversaries, some big event in our life, and we celebrate or we recollect when a year has gone by, or maybe it's the anniversary of someone's death, or some kind of tragic event, and we take it very much for granted. It's just very normal for us. Just as we divide our life into days and weeks and months, and these kind of equal divisions, that we categorize everything according to. Or if we think about it, we say a year, 6 years have gone by. What that means is that this planet, this particular little wobbly ball floating around in space, has done 6 lapses of the sun, hurtling around at 93 million miles away from the sun, moving through space. It's come through this circuit half a dozen times now. And when it comes back to the same place on that circuit, roughly speaking, then we say, a year has gone by, June the 1st. But we can miss the fact that this whole thing is constructed. It's a fabricated reality. Days and months, years, they don't have any kind of absolute existence. At tea time we were talking about conventions, and this subject came up. We miss the fact that to say, today is Saturday night, it'll be a Dhamma talk. This is a fixed and absolute reality. Well, if you come here 7 years ago, driven up Frank Prince's Drive, pulled into the front yard and come and sat where you are, you'd be in his garage. There'll be a dead Chevy just about where our friend here in the middle, she'd be sitting somewhere where the engine block, her kind of head poking above the hole where the engine used to be. A very, very sick, either a sick or a very, very a dead or a very sick Chevy. So it's always helpful to consider how much we we create solid realities when there's just fabricated agreements. Calling this, 2002. In the Buddhist calendar, this is not 2002, this is 2545. I can always remember because it's the same year as my age. I was born in 2499, so most of the year it's my same as my age. And in the Muslim calendar it's different, the Jewish calendar is different. Even in the Chinese Buddhist calendar it's different. It's 3,700 and something. What year is it? What time is it? Well, it depends where you are on the planet. It depends what kind of creature you are. If you're a nocturnal creature, you're still, getting the last snooze in before you have to get up and do your nightly routine. If you're a songbird, then it's the ending of the day. You're looking to see where you're going to roost for the night. You hear the kind of roosting calls of the songbirds as they settle at the end of the daylight hours. So what time is it? We say it's 8:48. 8:38. There you are. It was 8:48 for a moment there. 8:38. So these are there are certain things in our lives which we see as kind of agreements and other things that we just take to be solid realities, and it's this latter part that is really worthy of our attention, worthy of reflecting on and looking at, examining that. Because it's just areas where we create so much difficulty for ourselves, or we get into such conflicts and fights and struggles over different aspects of our lives so easily. Because of the quality of identification, we cling to the idea of different ways of judging things. Something is good, something is bad, something is beautiful, something is ugly, something is a success, something is a failure, something is admirable, something is ugly. It's so extraordinary, the kind of value systems that we have. So, like right now, a lot of the world is getting extremely excited because it's the World Cup. And some of you, being Americans, might think, what World Cup? The World Cup. The World Cup. What could that be about? Is that some sort of piece of crockery that's sort of shaped like the planet and sliced in half? The World Cup. Maybe the biggest cup in the world? What would that be? Super Bowl? Heard of that. Super Bowl. But the World Cup, what could that be about? Because people don't get very excited about soccer in this country. At least they didn't used to. We found a lot of the rest of the planets, they'll hold off the nuclear war in India till the World Cup is over. Just the kind of fixation, fascination that we can create over a thing like a sports game. It's very tragic what is happening in India, between India and Pakistan over Kashmir. But strangely enough, it's probably only half of a joke. Half joke, kind of a tragicomic irony that things like that do happen. So can't start the war yet. Got to wait till the playoffs are over. I remember once when I was travelling in Belfast, And I was being taken out for a walk. This was through the very fiercely Republican area of the Falls Road by a few guys who were in the Buddhist group who lived in that part of town, so that the heavily Republican IRA area of town. Walking along with these guys, and then we walked off the edge of town, and then we're climbing up into the hills, and there was this huge radio mast standing right on top of the hill, and it was just sort of a thin barbed wire fence around it, and almost no protection at all. And I said, how come they got all these massive police installations and these heavy bunkers arranged all over the place, and something like this is an obvious target, great big aerial can knock that over easily. Why this got a little barbed wire fence around it? And they said, oh, well, that's the TV transmitter. No one in their right mind would blow that up. That would mean that a TV would go out for everyone. It's like, they would knock that down. It was kind of tragic, but also kind of ironically hilarious. So what we end up making important. So now, yesterday's big news, France got beaten by Senegal, 1-0. You say, Senegal, what's that? France got beaten by Senegal, 1-0. Now what does that mean? So for a lot of people who are following football, that's like, wow, really, amazing, incredible, how could that happen? France, they were the favourites. It's like when Jody Parlow comes bouncing into the house and says, the Patriots made it. Says, the Patriots made it. Which Patriots? Patriotic about what? No, it's about football. Oh, football. So who do they play for? So we kind of get lost in our own world. We create value systems and lose ourselves in them. Being Buddhist, being a Theravadin Buddhist, or being a Thai forest tradition Theravadin Buddhist, being an Ajahn Chah Thai forest tradition Theravadin Buddhist, being a California-based Ajahn Chah. We can get pretty particular about the things that we're identified with, and this is amazing how often Ajahn Chah would hammer away, would press these kind of points and try to bring it to our attention. How solid we make things in our lives that just seem so normal, so real. We live with them day in, day out, all year round, being a monastic, being a layperson, being a woman, being a man, being old, being young, being rich, being poor. Just what does that mean? What do these things mean? And I remember several times when I was in Thailand and on different occasions when Ajahn Chah would say things like, there are no monks here, there are no nuns here, there are no lay people here. And you see people kind of glancing around like, did I get that? Did you hear what I just heard? What can he mean? He says there, and that if we think that that's what we are, if we take that to be an absolute reality, then we've missed the Dhamma. We've missed the reality. So the point is to reflect on these things which are constructed realities. He would often use the example of a person's name. Like when we're born, we don't have a name. My mother was going to call me Lucy, and both my sisters were going to be called David. So you can see my mother had very remarkable intuitive powers about her pregnancies. So she was sure I was going to be a girl, Lucy. But then I appeared and realized that Lucy was not going to be a good name for me. So we get a name after we're born, and then that becomes who we are, and then it changes. Our names get changed along the way, especially if you move to California. Lots of very exotic name changes happen in this part of the world. Who am I? What am I my name? A gender, like calling ourselves a woman, calling ourselves a man. Certainly, again, definitely, California life and current surgical techniques, hormone treatments. Not even just the choice of two anymore. You can kind of pick your blend. Which particular combination of characteristics you'd like to have, and exactly kind of what the construction we can choose. What sort of gender blend we'd like to be. What's beautiful, what's ugly. It varies enormously. One of our friends in the Bay Area, who was a ophthalmologist, said that they used to wonder why in a lot of the, I guess, the kind of, it'd be the stone carvings and etchings in the middle, kind of Mesoamerica. I guess the Incas or the Aztecs, I forget which ones. But they noticed that a lot of the people were cross-eyed. Their eyes were crossed, and they thought, maybe this was some kind of graphic representation. And they found out through time that they actually used to cut the muscle in the eyes, so the eyes would be crossed, because crossed eyes was considered a sign of incredible beauty. Which is bizarre to us, but then of course if you were an Inca back 1,000 years ago, they said, well, of course. I mean, who wouldn't find crossed eyes attractive? I mean, stands to reason, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't it? So what we create as being beautiful or ugly, as things that we just go through our days without even blinking at. Following a routine. We create a schedule, and then suddenly, we're strapped to that. If it's like Saturday evening, 7:30, and like Ajahn or I haven't shown up, it's like suddenly, sort of agitated movements, people coming in the house. 7:30, Ajahn. Or it's 7:40, 7:50. Oh, really? Well, of course, it's Saturday evening, it's the evening puja, it's supposed to be there. We create endless, I could sit here all night listing the kind of things we do, but just looking through our own world, just looking at these creations that come into being, identities with our career, our profession, our marital status, monastic status, being ordained, not being ordained, being divorced, being married, being happily married, being unhappily married, being both unhappily and unhappily married, being neither happily nor unhappily married. How do we judge it? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How do we judge it? So what Ajahn Chah would always point out, and what I found incredibly helpful advice, because at first, when I'd hear this kind of thing, I just couldn't make it out. So of course you've got monastics and you've got lay people. Why would you come into a monastery and go through this whole procedure if you weren't going to become a monk? Why bother if there's no monks there at the end of it? It's like it's all a trick. Fooled you. Suffer like crazy, learn all this chanting, sit for hours on end without moving, and then doesn't exist. Fooled ya. you know, so that we kind of it was befuddling, confusing. I couldn't figure out what it was about. But the more that we look at it and reflect, we begin to see that, and here the kind of thing that he was saying was that it's not the convention that's the problem, it's getting lost in it. It's when the suffering starts, when we turn something which is a convenient fiction into being an absolute truth. We say, this is what I am. I am a man. I am a monk. I am a doctor. I am a divorcee. I am a mother. I have a good marriage. I had a rotten childhood. Well, what we create then becomes inked in, becomes solid, and then just in that solidification, we can feel the world contracting. We can feel like the universe starts to shrink as soon as we have that certainty, that kind of absoluteness. This is how I experience it. When we turn it into something absolute and solid, instantly it becomes burdensome. And so that the more that I say, just using monasticism, so the more if I think I am absolutely a monk, then immediately it's like, oh God, what a pressure, what a burden, what an imposition. How can I bear carrying this around? But then, as soon as there's the recollection, oh well, just what is a monk? What is it's just a kind of human agreement. You just adopt this style of walking around in brown bits of cloth, shave your hair off regularly, and then people say the word monk when they look at you. And that's what a monk is. It's an agreement to do certain things and to not do other things. It's some agreed behaviors. That's what it is. If there's it's just a human agreement. There's nothing absolutely there. And when that's recollected, then suddenly it's like, oh, it's just, how could it be anything more than a costume or a mask, a medium to function through? There's nothing. How could there be anything absolute or solid to it? Then you find it's in just even forming the words or the idea. Suddenly everything lightens up, and you think, oh, what a relief! That makes everything a lot easier. We don't have to carry that around. We don't have to be that or defend that or qualify that or justify it, support it, believe in it. It doesn't have to be ultimately valid or satisfying or the best thing. It just happens to be this particular pattern. So then we can, the other end of the scale is where we might feel that burdened by so many kind of rules and structures and conventions of different aspects of life. And so we want to toss them all out and get rid of them. So we try to find freedom through defying convention. And again, Ajahn Chah would often talk about this using the example of names. He said, we use names. When we're born, we don't have a name. We acquire a name. Our name is determined into existence, because if we don't have some way of designating this person from another person, then he says when you want to talk to somebody, and then all you can do is say, hey, person, then everyone's going to turn and look at you, aren't they? Because everyone's person. So we create names of Susan and John and Stephen and Mary and so forth, so then we can get by in the world. So the point is not trying to defy conventions or find freedom through that, because you're still in a way trapped in the fence, in the kind of prison of conventions, even when we're trying to negate them. because that very effort to negate actually is saying there is a real solid thing here that needs to be pushed away or needs to be gotten rid of. So the point is to understand the use of conventions and structures, that we, when we see them clearly, when we understand them, then we can do that, we can perform that, we can be a woman, we can be a man, we can be a child, we can be a parent, we can be all these different activities or identities. We can pick them up and speak through them, function through them whenever it's necessary, but we're not fooling ourselves that there's anything kind of absolute or solid about that. We're able to use those qualities so they serve us rather than becoming something which imprisons us. So then we pick up a convention like Buddhism or a meditation technique, or we pick up a trade or whatever it might be, and then we find it's a skillful means, a tool. We're not say having to justify it or defend it or convince ourselves that it's the most important and wonderful thing in the world, but that it's good enough. It serves a particular purpose. It has a useful effect. So we can pick up, say, Theravada Buddhism or Thai forest monastic tradition. We can pick up being a lay practitioner, being a monastic, and we see, well, none of it is absolutely real. So, if we're carrying around like defending or kind of justifying to ourselves why it's good to be a monastic, or why I really want to be a lay person and I don't want to be a monastic, or why Buddhism is better than Islam, or Catholicism is terrible because of this, and the Mahayanists are really bad because of that. And, it's just even saying it, if you feel ourselves getting constipated, clogged up and burdened. So the trick is to find the middle way, whereby we can use a convention, we can use the tools and structures for getting through life, but without confusion about them. Now, it might be that we feel that, well, if I don't really believe in it, if I don't look at it as something solid and absolute, then how can I take it seriously? How can I be sincere about keeping all these rules? We have, like as monastics, we have scads and scads of very strict rules that we're supposed to be keeping all the time. Well, if we just say, well, there's no monk, then there's no such thing as monks or nuns, then, well, hey, all these rules are completely meaningless, so we don't have to keep them anymore. How can you be serious about it? Well, this is the strange thing about the middle way, or say in lay life, say, well, marriage is just a convention. It's just a human agreement. Ajahn Amaro said that Saturday evening. I was there. I heard him say it. It's just, there's nothing there. It's all empty. And it's just a transparent, nebulous structure. And then trying to explain to your spouse who this strange voice is on the answering machine with this mysterious and very provocative message. Oops. So we look at the practice in terms, work with the practice in terms of the middle way, which means we see that things are empty, but also we use them with complete care and sincerity. As soon as the mind drifts into, well, it's empty, therefore I don't have to bother, then we've lost sight of the Dhamma. Because what's happening is that the situation is being co-opted by our laziness, by our greed, by our defilements, and it's basically the kind of ego-based selfish concerns are taking over and using the idea of emptiness or just conventional reality as an excuse for following the path of least resistance. So we step back and say, well, no, it's not a matter of obsessing about the rules or obsessing about the marriage or obsessing about our occupation or our ethics and taking them to be absolutely solid. It's both seeing that they're empty and taking them absolutely seriously, being extraordinarily careful simultaneously. And that might seem to defy logic. So, well, either it's empty and it doesn't matter, or it's real and it does. Now, come on, which one? Is it A or is it B? And so it can be frustrating to the rational mind. But when we practice with this, when we look and see how this works, when we see, say, using say the example of the life of the Buddha as an example, we see there is both this perfect insight into the ultimate nature of reality, into these kind of the conditioned and constructed nature of conventional realities. But yeah, there is this extraordinary care and attention to living skillfully. And the way Ajahn Chah would explain this, I found very, very helpful, because he'd say, well, why is it wrong to do that? Why is it wrong to go against the conventions? Why is it wrong because to say break the precepts? He says it's wrong because of people's defilements. That's where it's wrong. I mean, you might be able to say to your spouse, well, this is just that kind of husky voice coming off the answering machine. This is just sound. It's just ear consciousness, dear. It's just sound impacting the eardrum, just being converted into electrical impulses in your brain. There's really nothing there. It's all empty. Whack. It's wrong because of other people's opinions and their feelings and their defilements, so that it's out of order because of the way we are as human beings. So that kind of balance, it's like a strange and wonderful balancing point whereby we take it all absolutely seriously and we let it all go completely. And we find, even though that defies reason, when the heart is really attuned to the present moment, when there's true mindfulness, then we find both of those qualities there. It's like as if one eye was seeing everything matters and the other eye was seeing nothing matters. And it's these two points of vision that gives us the kind of 3D perspective, the real perspective on life. If we just have one, the eye that says nothing matters, or the eye that sees that everything matters, then it's only like having 2D vision. When we want to find directions for living, or if we say we want to really establish a way of practice in this insight to see through the conventions that we live with, that along with that very radical letting go and dropping of these kind of structures and importances that we create in our lives, we see around us, the way we judge other people being this or that. So-and-so's a Republican. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? See, do you just say, no, well, Republican. What is a Republican? It's just a word of a few syllables. Republican. Just four noises, 4 syllables, little noises, innocent in their own right. Of course, then there's George W. It's even less syllables. was a very ordinary name a few years ago. W was a very, very innocent letter of the alphabet. Now it's loaded with all kinds of acquired characteristics, but still just W. So just being able to see through all of that and be able to let that go, then you might feel like it kind of leaves us rootless or sort of out in the middle of the traffic. Not, if we are deconstructing a lot of the conventions that we've sort of used to orient ourselves in life with and give us a sense of identity or direction. Its counterpart then is the practice of sila, of taking the precepts very seriously, so that in a way it's almost sort of as important that the more fully and completely we train the heart to let go and to see the emptiness of conventions, to drop that kind of attachment, or that method of orientation. It's like that needs to be partnered with an ever deeper and full commitment to the living by the precepts, because actually that vision of emptiness is intrinsically related to a beauty of conduct, so that but sometimes that's not clear and we can get lost and disoriented or kind of not quite know the right way to act. And if we were fully enlightened, then that would be the natural way that we would conduct ourselves, that we would not be drawn towards acting harmfully or selfishly or dishonestly. But that isn't always arising. That's not always clear in the natural flow of things. So just taking the 5 precepts and having that as a clear pattern for conduct is the important, necessary counterpart really to this kind of depth of letting go. So that on the one hand, as we drop the conventions and learn, really train ourselves consciously to see through things and not identify with them, to see them as empty, then that's what we use to guide our actions. The non-violence, the not taking what is not given, so not taking the life of other living creatures, not taking advantage of people or engaging in sexual misconduct, to be honest and modest, careful with our speech. Like these are the structures, the guides that we can rely on as ways that will always bring our actions, our ways of being, our speech, into accord with Dhamma. These two are important partners. So this kind of clinging to conventions is called Silapata Upadana. And that when we let go of conventions and we establish the heart in this seeing beyond that, letting go of that it's the partner is that of virtue, the natural result of that letting go as it manifests in the world is a life which is modest, which is harmonious, which is simple, which is non-violent. When we think about tossing all the conventions out the window, then we associate that with a kind of wild behavior. But if we look at the Buddha as an example, when the Buddha tossed all the conventions out the window and he saw that being a warrior noble, being a prince, being a man, being so forth was all essentially void, it manifested in a supremely gentle and sensitive manner of being. moving in the world, functioning in the world, just using what he needed, but living very lightly, very easily, without a kind of demanding or obsessive quality, needy quality. So I offer these thoughts for consideration this evening.